Security, please remove him from the room.
Well, that escalated quickly. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent and nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet culture, and more. Wow. So Dr. Fauci, of course, the infamous or famous, depending on your perspective, a public health official and former head of the NIH, National Institute of Health, he just testified before the Senate, and it was insane. Obviously, these Republican senators, chaired by Senator Rand Paul, who's had it out for Fauci over all the different COVID-related controversies like school closures and lockdowns and the lab leak theory and gain-of-function research and all this stuff, they are obviously very outraged at Dr. Fauci, and they planned to revisit some of the things that he is alleged to have done that may have breached the law, like, for example, allegedly, in the accusation of Senator Paul and others, lying to Congress during previous testimony about gain-of-function research and whether or not they were funding it in China. But of course, President Biden pardoned Dr. Fauci, gave him a blanket pardon on the way out of office, which is unusual, but so he can't really be prosecuted for those crimes. However, we were all watching this hearing with great interest because if he repeated lies or if he once again perjured himself in this hearing where he was forced to testify via subpoena, then of course that would be not protected by the pardon. The pardon only covers past things, not future things. So there's a lot of attention on this, and it ended up being one of the craziest hearings I've ever seen. We're going to go over 3 key moments. Here's the first one, where Dr. Fauci announced his intent to stonewall every single question with the Fifth Amendment. Listen to this.
Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
So this is a big deal because I don't know that anyone was expecting him to take the Fifth Amendment, which is a constitutional protection that we all have against self-incrimination. So if the police ask you, did you murder the guy? You can say, I plead the Fifth. You can't be forced to answer that question. You can't be forced to testify against yourself and implicate yourself in a crime. But there's some interesting questions here because he didn't just, plead the Fifth Amendment in response to certain questions about alleged crimes, like did you lie to Congress, which would be a crime? Did you fund this against the rules or anything like that? I plead the Fifth. He just totally stonewalled the entire hearing, answering every single question with the same mantra about invoking the Fifth Amendment, including questions like, is this document in the folder in front of you? What color tie are you wearing? What color is the carpet? And he had just stonewalled point blank. So 2 things can be true at the same time. One is that you absolutely do, all Americans do, have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and they can invoke it. But 2 is that in a context like this, when you've already been pardoned for the past activity, and there's so many legitimate questions to be asked based on the things that you should be held accountable for. I mean, he, in these newly leaked diaries from Dr. Fauci, for example, acknowledges that he was personally responsible for California and New York City and a bunch of their pandemic policies. He brags and gloats about all the press coverage he's getting and how famous he was. And there's so many other controversies, like whether he lied about gain-of-function research, whether or not he was honest about what he truly did and didn't know about masks at different times. And then, he was trying to get himself cash prizes and all this stuff that I think the American people are entitled to scrutiny and answers for. And when you just totally stonewall, it's a terrible look. And while legally it can't and shouldn't be used against you, just that you refuse to incriminate yourself, the public does tend to draw certain implications from it. Maybe they shouldn't, maybe they're not supposed to, but they do tend to think that it makes you look guilty to just stonewall like this. And what will be interesting is to see whether or not this will hold up, because you're not allowed to just refuse to comply with a subpoena and refuse to testify before Congress. The exception being you could refuse questions under the Fifth Amendment, but can you just blanketly stonewall like this? I honestly don't know the answer, and what they will end up probably doing, as Senator Paul explains in this second moment, is referring him for contempt of Congress and for prosecution by the DOJ, and the DOJ will have to either look into it and actually it is covered, or they'll have to charge him and have to argue in court that his actions are protected by the Fifth Amendment, and a judge will ultimately rule on that or not. I'm not sure, but I can say we haven't really seen this. At least I've never seen this before, having watched hundreds of House and Senate hearings at this point in my career, where a witness answers the Fifth to every single question. And it may be a bit dubious that you can invoke your Fifth Amendment right to not answer what color tie you're wearing. I don't know. I guess it will all have to be litigated, but Senator Rand Paul was not happy and did promise further action will be coming down the pike. Let's listen to him.
The chairman has denied your assertion of privilege and directed you to answer, but you nonetheless refuse and stand on privilege despite the existence of the pardon. The committee will have to consider after this hearing what appropriate action should be taken against you for the failure to testify after being directed to do so. It's against the law to obstruct an investigation of Congress. There will be repercussions to your refusal to testify today. Senator Peters.
So there you have it. I mean, they're certainly going to look into whether there's anything they can do about it. He might get away with it. He might be within his rights. I honestly don't know. Either way, though, I think it's a bad look. I understand that he is in a position that's precarious because they're trying to get him to implicate himself in a crime, but there was always the option of simply telling the truth in answering all the questions correctly, or answering the questions in general, but then specific ones related to things they're trying to go after you, like potentially the gain of function thing and lying about it. That on those questions, you take the Fifth Amendment. So I certainly think it is a terrible look for Dr. Fauci, who's, I don't know if we've ever seen a bigger downfall in a public figure's reputation. He was so overwhelmingly praised and appreciated at the beginning, and then just more and more his kind of egomania and duplicitousness all became obvious to us over the course of so many scandals and stories and hearings and showdowns, and a lot of his policy advice that he gave looks really, really bad in hindsight, and he stuck to it over time in ways that I think were obviously not wise, right? He took far too long. And then he tried to, one thing I really don't appreciate about Dr. Fauci is, for example, in interviews like an interview with Batya Ungar Sargon, then of The Hill, Rising, he's like, well, I never shut down any schools. I never locked out. He tried to dodge accountability for it. Like, well, I just gave advice. But of course, we all know that effectively he was telling people what to do, and they were listening to him. All these major policymakers, and his own diaries admit that both the New York City and California governments directly heeded his instructions to close down schools and do other things that proved destructive and harmful and counterproductive. So it's like, I can't stand when people refuse to take accountability. But this hearing did unfortunately turn into a bit of a clown show. I want to read a tweet from Politico Legal Affairs correspondent who writes, pleading the Fifth here is tricky legally because Fauci is pardoned for all pre-2025 conduct. Fear of a future perjury trap is a lot to hang a blanket assertion of Fifth Amendment privilege on, and it also opens him up to being held in contempt and prosecuted on that basis. So, like I said, I don't know the legal ramifications of all of this. I'm sure it will be pursued, but I can say it is really not a good look for Dr. Fauci. And it's not the clip that Republicans were looking for from him, because they would love to relitigate all this stuff for good reason. A lot of terrible and insane things were done, but they would love to relitigate this rather than, talk about or address the things going on right now under the Trump administration that people aren't thrilled about. But yeah, they were looking for a clip where they could, actually have a back and forth with him and have a gotcha moment. But a clip where because unfortunately, welcome to the Real Housewives of Congress. They're all just looking for clips. That's what they're doing here. They're looking for their 2-minute clip they can try to get on Fox News or MS Now, respectively. Cameras in the Congress was a big mistake, in my opinion. And we should just have audio only, I think, because it leads to the grandstanding for the cameras. But in this case, like, they were looking for a certain clip of trying to pull a gotcha on Fauci on a specific issue or whatever, but they're going to get other clips where they're just asking him really legitimate questions. Like there's one, I think it was Senator Hawley, Josh Hawley from Missouri, is asking Dr. Fauci about the record that suggests he was like trying to get his colleagues to help him qualify for a $1 million prize during all of this. And it's like, okay, St. Fauci, the public health hero, who we were all told was so selfless, and he was like sitting for In Style magazine and all this stuff during this time in which he was, ostensibly leading our response to this crisis. I think there's some questions to be asked about the ethics of that conduct and the priorities he displayed at the very minimum. Of course, there's also legal questions about it, but he is pardoned for all of that conduct from President Biden's blanket pardon. So who knows if there could even be an avenue there. There's presumably could not be. But the hearing really did turn into a clown show. But the Rogans will have a powerful clip about Dr. Fauci of him just refusing to answer these basic and important and legitimate questions. And I don't know. I don't think this went well for him. I particularly think the antics from his attorneys were bizarre and strange. So this third key moment from the hearing is when one of Dr. Fauci's attorneys starts getting up and yelling. And I actually don't know what he was saying. Because I'm obviously not there for the hearing. I'm watching it on the live streams from my house, and the mics didn't pick up Dr. Fauci's attorneys and what he was yelling, but he made a big scene and actually had to be ejected by security. Watch this.
But the attorneys are not recognized. In fact, the attorney was told not to sit at the table, and he's not obeying that recommendation. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered, for a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
What drama.
Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half a dozen attorneys that he brought along today.
Wow, the shade from Rand Paul there. But I'll say, what advice does he need, since he's just going to repeat the same one sentence about invoking his Fifth Amendment rights to every single question? I just thought this was really silly behavior, the attorney getting up and starting shouting and talking and refusing to sit down and be quiet. Like, you don't have the right to do that. You're only allowed to testify when you are a witness who was called to testify. You can't just hijack a hearing and start yelling, and just because you're his attorney doesn't give you some special right to speak when you're not recognized. Now, people always have or often have their attorneys with them when they are testifying, and the attorney can advise them and say something to them or pass them a note or something, but you can't just hijack the microphone and start yapping. And to whatever extent you felt the need to justify like the legal rationale for Dr. Fauci's decision to stonewall and refuse to answer questions, you could do that. They did already do that in a letter they sent that was entered into the record. So that's already in the record. And then they can release public statements. Like Dr. Fauci can post a statement on social media from his attorneys explaining the legal rationale or whatever. They obviously have the right to make their case about what they're doing, but they don't have the right to just stand up and start shouting in a hearing. And I think Senator Paul was well within his rights to have them removed by security. And it's also just optically not a very good look. I don't think that really helps Dr. Fauci's perception here, that his attorney's going rogue and just started shouting like a crazy person and then has to be removed by security. So the whole hearing, frankly, was an absolute chaotic mess. But I think it's kind of revealing about where both sides are at on this issue. The different Democratic senators who were there, they just praised Dr. Fauci. They just talked about what a joke this hearing was, and they didn't really want to engage on the substance of any of it. But Dr. Fauci hilariously wouldn't even answer their questions, which I guess makes sense because he couldn't claim the Fifth Amendment and then only answer the Democratic questions. That would be a really bad look on top of an already bad look. But really, the two parties, their perspectives on this whole issue became very clear. And there's certainly a certain strand of Republican thought on these issues that I am not on board with, where they get into kind of total quackery or conspiracy nonsense. But I think the demand for accountability for Dr. Anthony Fauci, I think the blanket pardon was disgraceful. He shouldn't have been pardoned. And any legitimate prosecution should have. He'll get his day in court. He'll get a judge who can evaluate the claims against him, a jury. I think that should have been allowed to play out because he oversaw a truly seismic societal crisis and the response to it, and frankly made a lot of extremely bad decisions that hurt a lot of people, and then was very dishonest about them over and over again in ways that have been documented. So I think that he should have been held accountable for that, and burying your head in the sand and pretending that he's still just, a totally apolitical, not at all problematic public health servant who did his best, I think is naive beyond belief at this point. So I'm certainly more sympathetic to the Republican senators in this hearing, but the whole thing was just, I don't know, very Real Housewives of Washington, D.C., and partly because Dr. Fauci made it that way with his antics. That's just my take on the situation, but you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button, and if you support my nonpartisan, independent perspective, unfortunately, the best business model is just to exclusively pander to one side. I don't do that, so I need support from viewers like you. Hit the join button here on YouTube or click the link in the pinned comment to become a channel member and support my content and my work. And with that, guys, we'll be back with more real soon.